Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us after this Labor Day long weekend, Tuesday morning. Excited to talk cloud API publishing with Jaime Ryan. He's a partner solution architect here at Layer 7, and he's joining us from San Diego. Is that right, Jaime?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, so today we're going to take your questions, chat live on publishing APIs from the cloud. And we were just at VMware last week. Jaime was there answering questions at the booth, so we thought we'd kind of carry on with a little VMware theme and talk cloud API publishing. Just remind everybody as you kind of slowly come in, you can tweet us questions. You know, if you're multitasking at your desk and you need to go into your email or whatever, you can always just tweet the question to hashtag Layer7Live, and we'll get to it at some point. You can check in and chat. So if you're at live stream, make sure you just click the red button that says check in and chat. If you're on Facebook, click the live stream icon, and then the stream will open up and it's the same thing. Click check in and chat. So yeah, I'm excited.
Email.
Pardon?
Email.
Oh yeah, right. And you can always email your questions to techtalk@layer7tech.com. And so that's, you know, if you can't stick around for the whole broadcast and you have a real question or a question you really want answered, email that in and I'll get those to Jaime and we'll answer you sometime later in the day. So I'm going to turn it over to Jaime to sort of introduce the topic, and we'll start taking your questions as soon as they start coming in. Thanks, everybody.
If that's not enough social media options, I don't know what is. So welcome to sunny San Diego. It's always summer here, so Labor Day doesn't really matter, but it's always nice to have a long weekend. Hope everybody enjoyed theirs. So today we're going to be talking about cloud APIs. So cloud API, probably two of the biggest buzzwords out there in IT right now. If we made it big data cloud APIs, we might get the triumvirate. But so what am I talking about when I talk about cloud APIs? For this presentation, I'm going to kind of keep it kind of general, so it can be just about anything. So we just got back from VMworld, as Steve Tate mentioned. So I've got a little bit of everything on the brain, so we can talk about vCloud, we can talk about vSphere, we can talk about VMware joining OpenStack if you want, but the topic is much broader than that. So let me do a quick overview of kind of the types of cloud APIs, the things that we could be talking about, and then feel free to ask about any of them. So starting kind of at the bottom layer with infrastructure APIs. So by infrastructure APIs, we're talking about everything from managing network stuff, spinning up actual virtualization platforms on hardware, and then kind of moving up the stack, still in infrastructure, we can start talking about cloud management as well. So provisioning, creating, deleting infrastructure pieces that you can then use to build your platform, to install operating systems if you'd like, and to move forward from there. The next step up, I would say, is kind of generic resources used for building applications. So storage, compute nodes, databases, anything where you need something generic, need a generic API to go out and write some piece of data or to do some very simple programmatic thing, which you can then incorporate into a larger application that you're building on top. And then third would be SaaS, basically. So we've kind of done the three levels of cloud as well: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and then software as a service. So this would be exposing business processes, exposing social media, integrating with social media, exposing some sort of e-commerce API, kind of at that layer. So your pieces of your application might want to connect out to other pieces of other people's applications or other applications in the cloud, and you can do that using an API. So again, this is a broad topic. If you go and do the usual search on programmable web for anything cloud, anything tagged with cloud, you end up with about 180 APIs, and that's gone up quite a bit, even in just the last 6 months. And then the various flavors of those go on from there. So with that out there, let's talk about infrastructure, let's talk about platform, let's talk about SaaS, whatever you'd like.
Okay. I can see we've got a first question through email. Is anyone winning the Cloud API standards war? And what's the war? Who's fighting?
Right. Everybody's fighting. And the answer is no. So
no one's winning.
There are certainly some big players in the war, and these standards are, again, around every layer. So you're talking about probably the most common one is the VMware standards versus the AWS standards versus the OpenStack standards. And it's not always a fair comparison because they don't necessarily do the same things. A lot of the vCloud APIs are, again, focused at kind of a lower level, more at the virtualization level and spinning up apps. A lot of the Amazon EC2 APIs are more focused on kind of that second layer, that platform as a service. So instantiating storage or having a piece of storage that you can interact with using an API. And then OpenStack is kind of trying to bridge the gap, but nobody's really winning. And there have been some recent developments where it looks like there might be some consolidation, but again, I think that's kind of a red herring. So at this most recent VMworld, VMware announced that they were going to support the OpenStack initiative. So they're going to become a paying member, they're going to become a gold member, they're going to support the OpenStack APIs. And that's great, and it's nice that you have that option available, but their APIs aren't going away either. And so there's always going to be some additional stuff on top or an additional set of APIs that aren't necessarily going to be compatible. Then you also have kind of the war between the war about sharing proprietary APIs. So Amazon came out with all of their APIs for the public cloud, so people could manage their infrastructure out in the public cloud. And Eucalyptus came out with those same APIs or some subset of those APIs for the private cloud. So in theory, this is good for the consumer. You can use the same APIs to manage your private cloud infrastructure that you do your public cloud infrastructure. In reality, it gets a little messy sometimes. You need to think about whether they're compatible, fully compatible. You need to think about whether they're implementing all of the APIs that you need. You need to think about whether the infrastructure underneath is going to run the same way. So if you're on Amazon, there's a list of compute nodes that you can choose from. There's a set list, and most people optimize their applications to run on those sizes. If you don't necessarily have those same sizes when you're managing the infrastructure yourself, then you can get into some questionable territory. So other APIs around storage. So there's a CDMI standard, Cloud Data Management Interface. But then at the same time, there's the S3 API from Amazon that everybody kind of uses as a de facto standard. So the standards bodies in this case aren't that powerful, and it's such a new and hot space that there's always going to be some infighting. There's always going to be new APIs. There's always going to be people that want to provide the value add on top of the standard API. It kind of reminds me of the telco APIs right now. So there's a one API initiative that most of the telcos support, but every single one also has their own APIs on top of that to provide those value-added benefits, to provide differentiators from their competitors, to provide stuff that's only available on their network.
Right.
And so a lot of the cloud providers are doing the same thing.
Okay. Another email question. Are there differences between APIs for public and private clouds? Or what are the differences?
There are. So there are some differences. Obviously, I mentioned Amazon and Eucalyptus. Amazon being the kind of the public cloud facing, Eucalyptus being the private cloud facing. And they reached an agreement 6 months ago or so, where they actually announced that they were going to be supporting each other's APIs. So Amazon finally gave the nod, the tacit approval to Eucalyptus to reuse their APIs for private cloud environments. Now I'm guessing there's some money involved, and there's going to be money involved with all these things. But again, there are still things to look out for. So there are networking considerations. The public cloud network is going to be different than a private cloud network. There are some different APIs, even within a single provider. So that Amazon has their normal EC2 API for the public cloud. They also have a VPC version of it, so the virtual private cloud, and those two are different. So you need to manage users a little differently in the VPC cloud, and so you start to get into some differences even within the same vendor. When you talk across vendor, say Amazon and Eucalyptus, then you have even more variability because they're not supporting. Eucalyptus doesn't support the entire stack of Amazon's APIs.
Right.
So you definitely get into some issues. What all this means for the consumer is that you really need to pay attention to what versions you're using, what versions you'd like to support moving forward, whether those things are going to change. And of course, here at Layer 7, we think the best way to do that is with a gateway. Basically, something sitting in front of those APIs and allowing you to publish a standard interface, whatever is best for your business, and then on the back, abstract away the actual implementation. Whether that implementation is public, private, both, we're all about kind of enabling the hybrid enterprise. So allowing you to make calls to something in the cloud, something in the Amazon cloud, as well as something in your own data center, whether that's using the same API or whether that's using another API that's yours and yours alone. So
that's the hybrid enterprise. Part of it is in the Amazon or the public cloud, and then the other part is on-premise?
Exactly. There's lots of reasons that people want to use the public cloud for bursting traffic, for peaks,
seasonal stuff, maybe.
Yeah, Black Friday, or when everybody logs on to check their SAT scores. Obviously, during tax time for some of the financial services stuff and tax vendors. So that's going to be very important at certain times of the year, and bursting is one of those things that people look for in cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Others are reduced capital expenditures, so you don't want to necessarily spend a bunch of money spinning up your own data center. It's easier just to use stuff out in the cloud, and it's a lot quicker. And we recently saw an amazing example of that with problems at OnLive. So OnLive was a new gaming startup, and they built out their own data center, and they had all this infrastructure, and then they had a tiny fraction of the population that they were expecting to support actually subscribe. And so they basically end up spending all their money on infrastructure, not getting the revenue they were expecting, and folding. They've since reopened, and who knows what it'll actually turn into, but reducing that upfront expenditure is quite a big deal for using those types of cloud solutions. And then a lot of people want to be closer to their consumers. They've got data, they've got integration with social media, they've got mobile users, and they want all that stuff out in the cloud. They want it hosted globally. They want to have stuff local to their salespeople. They don't necessarily want to run a single data center. And so it's pretty easy to farm that stuff out to the cloud and have everybody connect there instead of adding a bunch of traffic to your data center. All in all of these kind of add up to responsiveness, being able to respond quickly to your customer needs, to your consumers, to your partners, and really that's what's inherent in all of the kind of cloud attributes: virtualized, self-service, elastic, so you can log on, quickly spin up new stuff, and grow your business, grow your cloud with the business.
Cool. Next question. How do I avoid recreating my entire internal infrastructure in the cloud, including identity and operation systems?
Yes. So some people start like that. Some people take exactly what they have in the enterprise. They say, I want an exact clone of this out in the cloud. So I want to move all my stuff out, or I need the same level of operations. I need the same level of identity. So we're just going to take everything and put it out there. Whether it's being replicated, so you've got some LDAP repository being replicated from the data center to the cloud, which gets messy, or you're just building all that infrastructure from scratch. Again, that gets messy. So you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to federate some of that information across your internal network, your internal infrastructure, and the cloud. The most obvious kind of use case for federation is identity. So you want to be able to allow access to the people that should get access, whether they're your customers or your employees. But you don't necessarily want to replicate all of your internal users out in the cloud. So at layer 7, we talked about gateways being resident both in the cloud and in the data center, and doing that identity federation at the edge of the cloud environment for you. So whatever credentials you'd like to accept out in the cloud, it might be different. It might be a simple API key. It might be a username and password. It might be some sort of certificate-based credential where you're doing SSL with mutual auth. But then you shouldn't have to have all those identities living out in the cloud. So with layer 7, you can take that information and tie it back into the data center, tie it back into your existing identity and access management infrastructure, so that you don't have to duplicate all that effort both out in the cloud and in the data center. You can also do that's also true going outward. So if you're connecting out to SaaS services, if you want to go to Salesforce or Workday or anybody that has a service out in the cloud, but you don't necessarily want your employees to use their identity systems, you can implement single sign-on with almost all of those. So Salesforce is the 800-pound gorilla in the SaaS room. So you can implement single sign-on using SAML. You can actually have a local endpoint that you go to, and then a gateway like Layer 7. Or there's actually lots of kind of identity vendors that'll do single sign-on out to Salesforce. But you want it to be flexible enough a solution to take it out to any SaaS provider. So you would log in locally, use your username and password, the same that you use to maybe log into your desktop at work, or log into your email. That gets validated locally and generates a token, which you can then use to connect out to the actual application, be it on the web or through an API. So you want to manage a lot of that outgoing connection to SaaS services from your environment as well.
Right. Okay, and just a quick reminder to anybody out there listening and watching, don't be afraid to chat your questions, send them through the hashtag Layer7Live. We've got lots of time left, and Jamie's anxious to answer any questions you may have, and we'll just get right on to the next one.
Track down a surfboard and go surfing.
Sorry?
Otherwise, I'm going to track down a surfboard and go surfing.
I think that's a little reference to our last Tech Talk. Or maybe just being in San Diego. How's the weather?
It's always beautiful. So
It's always sunny in San Diego.
It's true.
Does it really matter what cloud provider I use? How do you choose between providers?
That's a good question, and it does. It matters more for just making sure that it meets your requirements. So they're all different. If you did attend VMworld last week and went out to the exhibit floor, there are thousands of booths, and it felt like every single one of them was some sort of cloud provider. And those run the gamut from infrastructure to platform to exchange to SaaS services. But there are just a huge number of cloud providers out there, and their marketing is all the same. They've got cloud, 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 cloud all over their booth. So how are you supposed to differentiate? Well, you really do at that point need to dig into connectivity, into APIs, into management, into operations, because those are the things that are going to matter in the long run. So you need to know what your cloud provider optimizes for. I talked to one person at VMworld that was criticizing one of the cloud providers. I won't name names, but they said they are not built to handle my kind of data. I need to quickly burst. I need to spin up a bunch of compute nodes. I need to shove a ton of data out to the cloud, crunch a bunch of numbers on it, and get some information back. And this particular hosting provider, cloud provider, is just not built for that. They're not built for the I/O. They're not built for the compute cycles. It starts to bog down. They're more built for, here's my simple web page. Here's a simple e-commerce site that I'm going to run. Here's my a really simple version of my 1990s data center that I've just kind of moved out to the cloud. So you need to explore those things. You need to see what your options are for management. You need to make sure there are APIs. You need to be comfortable with it. You need to like their interface, and so on.
Right. And I suppose it depends on what kind of business you're in as well, like what size your business is, what your needs are.
Absolutely. I mean, you need the support. You need the scalability. You need to make sure that those people are going to be confident hosting your stuff. Even the big players have problems. Amazon has had some really well publicized outages. So at that point, you need to think about DR, and you need to think about being multi-geography, and maybe having stuff in Amazon East and Amazon West, or maybe even in Europe. And that brings up other issues around replication. And so there are lots of questions. Obviously, it depends on the mission criticality of your business and what you're putting out there. If you're just exposing some content so that it's a little closer to your consumers, and that doesn't, you don't get a huge bandwidth bill going into your data center, that's fine, and you might not need a whole lot of DR for that. But if you are hosting a mission critical API that you're using, or your consumers are using, or that your partners are using, and if it matters, you need to you need to ask all those questions up front and make sure you get the right answers.
Right. And then another question coming in through email: How can I integrate with a third-party SaaS provider?
Sure. So there's a couple layers of integration, and I mentioned one of them already. Kind of the single sign-on integration out to Salesforce or any other provider, and a lot of those are kind of traditional authentication models. So more SAML, but there's also plenty of OAuth integration. And really, that's all about making sure that your internal identity matches up to at least the attributes that are required for defining your permissions out in the cloud. So they need to know what your enterprise thinks your permissions are. So if I log in as an administrator, and that's validated in my Active Directory or LDAP or SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager, whatever the case may be, there better be some attributes in that SAML assertion that's going out to the SaaS provider,
right.
as who I am and what sort of permissions I have. So that's the identity piece. Then there's the data piece. So data integration is a big deal, and there are companies that do just that. And it's a bit narrow, and most people don't really use them to the best of their, to the fullest extent of their capabilities. But that's all about integrating with your systems, generally on a transactional basis, but kind of low volume transactional basis. So that's connecting Salesforce to your CRM systems, or so going out to some Siebel API and putting something into Siebel every time a trigger gets called from Salesforce, or vice versa, or pulling something out of a database locally and sending it out to something on Amazon to kind of replicate some of your customer data or inventory data between the enterprise and what you have out in the cloud. Because for a lot of people, the cloud is going to be kind of their first line of defense. They're going to receive the request there from a mobile phone, from a web app, from whatever the case may be. That's where they get the request. You want to be able to have as much stuff up there as you can. And if that means grabbing some from a SaaS provider that's also out in the cloud, or from a partner that has exposed an API, that's all about kind of the data integration piece. And that could involve mapping, mapping of formats, mapping of protocols, mapping of, say, HTTP REST request to a database. It could involve mapping an internal SOAP request out to an external REST call. So there's lots of adaptation and mediation involved as well.
Right.
That also gets into kind of an orchestration question. So where does my data live? What order do I need to make calls in? Can I expose a nice friendly API from a bunch of more complex APIs on the back end? And generally that's something that you can do through a gateway like ours. So you can connect to arbitrary APIs on the back end, including out in a SaaS provider, and kind of look, keep your eyes on layer 7 in the coming months to see how that can get even more specific for some SaaS providers. But generically, you want to be able to make calls out, gather a bunch of data together, and then expose it in a nice, simple interface.
Right. Sounds good. Let me see what we've got here through email. What's the next big thing in an up-and-coming cloud APIs?
Okay.
What's the next big thing in up-and-coming cloud APIs?
Right. So, a lot of them are out there. Infrastructure's out there, platforms out there, all the higher level SaaS services are up there. So there's always going to be some new, exciting SaaS APIs that people can integrate, that people can really use to enable their workforce. Some of those are going to be public, some are going to be private. But I kind of want to spin down to the other end at this point and talk about the lower level. So all of this cloud stuff is built on the same basic building blocks. So there's at some point needs to be some hardware. You can't virtualize all these servers and services without some underlying hardware underneath. So large disk arrays, huge amounts of RAM, multi-core CPUs, and then there also needs to be some networking. So to this point, that's generally been some Cisco boxes or some large routers, and the two kind of combine You need to manage both, and the two kind of combine to make the platform on top of which all of this virtualized cloud environment is built. But there's really been no getting around that to this point, and I think that's actually what's coming next. So obviously you can't virtualize the physical hardware for a disk array, say, but the network layer is starting to become virtualized. So one of the big announcements recently at VMware is the acquisition of Nicira. So they spent a lot of money on it, so you know it's important. It's something like 25 times the initial investment in it. It's only 100 people, and they're spent billions on it. So it's
Sorry, what was the name of the company? I missed that.
Nicira, Nicira.
Right.
And so this is a big acquisition because it means that some of that network layer is also going to get virtualized and also going to be part of the foundation for cloud moving forward. Obviously, VMware is all about kind of that cloud infrastructure, public or private, but this lets them get even deeper and lets you virtualize some of that. They've had some to this point, some virtualization of the network layer. You can come up with virtual VPNs and virtual firewalls and a lot of some stuff that works at a particular level, but isn't really useful in terms of managing an entire infrastructure at the network layer. And I think that's where these things are going. And there are bound to be some competitors to Nicira out there, and you'll probably see some more acquisitions in the space from Microsoft or HP or anybody that really has a large cloud presence or is trying to spin up a cloud presence. Citrix. So a lot of that is going to be competitive, and I think that potentially Savvis works at a bit higher level, but yeah, CenturyLink, a lot of the network layer stuff, I think is about to be virtualized, and that could spell disaster for some hardware networking people, but it's definitely something to keep your eye on.
Right, okay. Like I said, too, anybody out there has a question, don't feel free to just chat it, tweet it, hashtag at Layer 7 Live, or sorry, not at Layer 7, just hashtag Layer 7 Live. You can email them, like I mentioned in the beginning. If you don't have time to stick around and listen, wait in line for your question to be answered, you can email them to us at techtalk@layer7tech.com, and I'll make sure I get the question to Jamie or whoever else and get you an answer to your question.
I feel like I'm on those reality shows where I need to point out my phone number. Some people
yeah, that's right.
vote for me. Dance02. So if there are no questions right now, let me just point out something that I learned in my research. So
sure.
Again, programmable web is kind of the hub for open APIs. And I mentioned there are a ton of cloud APIs, things tagged cloud. Those broke down kind of the next tag that was on there. Was the most popular ones were internet, which is so amorphous it doesn't really mean anything. Storage, which is a big deal, and definitely an important component of any cloud strategy, and hosting. So just hosted cloud providers. And in the last 6 months, the numbers for all of those have really just jumped significantly. And then they also analyzed, about 6 months ago in February, they analyzed kind of the technologies underneath. So whether they're REST APIs or SOAP APIs, whether they're XML or JSON. And as the trends in all of these APIs have shown, definitely way more REST APIs than SOAP APIs. 6 months ago, there were 75 REST APIs. Now there's 132.
Wow.
The SOAP APIs have gone from 13 to 23. Again, it's a significant percentage, but obviously REST is really winning that battle.
So what's behind the shift from SOAP to REST?
Well,
Less complex?
less complex, easier to access. The people that are doing the development, the kind of web developers, and even it gets into marketing and lines of business. It's not being driven from the bottom up, from IT up. It's being driven from the top down. People wanting to expose new data and applications via APIs, and those people are more comfortable with REST. It's a little lower barrier to entry,
Right.
lower overhead, less structure. So it feels a little less like you're working for the man when you're writing out to a REST API, as opposed to when you're consuming WSDL and going through
Okay.
a SOAP interface. But they're both still valid, and we have customers that are exposing both REST APIs and SOAP APIs and one or the other. A lot of them are doing kind of transformation between the two as well. None of this stuff exists in a vacuum. A lot of them have been around in the SOA space for a long time, have SOAP APIs that they now want to expose as REST APIs. And there's no reason you can't do that. There's no reason you can't expose multiple versions, even expose multiple standards. So OpenStack versus vCloud versus the EC2 APIs. There's no reason you can't manipulate those kind of at the API layer, provide a layer of abstraction, and then on the back end be calling whatever you want. So we have customers that are expose a vCloud API but aren't VMware customers. So it's all a matter of making back end calls to whatever systems you have.
Right.
In the REST, I'm sorry, in the XML versus JSON, that's kind of striking as well. So 6 months ago, XML 55, JSON 45, in terms of numbers of APIs supporting one or the other. So XML had it by just a bit. As of last night, it's XML 90, JSON 98. So JSON's taken the lead in terms of structure, message format for interacting with these cloud APIs. And again, we take a pragmatic approach where we don't necessarily think you need to choose one or the other. You can choose both. You can choose one or the other. But whatever you have, we can work with it and allow you to publish it in a way that's best for your consumers. The best identity tokens, whatever identity tokens you want to expose, deep integration with your internal identity management systems, whatever format you want to expose, whatever protocol you want to expose. It's really about the flexibility and the responsiveness, which is why people get into the cloud in the first place. Being able to quickly respond to customer needs. And if your customer is 100 times your size and wants a SOAP API, you better have a way to get it to them quickly. Or if they need a new operation or a new version, something specific to them, you better find a way to provide that capability. And so a lot of our customers are doing that now. They're doing specific APIs targeted to particular consumers. So you can actually log on and define exactly what you want your data to look like when it comes back. And there's a lot of transformation and manipulation that happens on the fly when you actually make that request. And of course, it's optimized whenever possible. So we do all the caching and prefetching, and so it's really a matter of selecting the data and then putting it in the format you want, rather than doing all of those operations on the back end server every time. But really, people want that custom interface. People want to have something that looks good on their phone, even if they have a device that isn't one of the 10 most popular. They might want 100 different customizations for 100 different devices. And our customers are providing that through gateways like ours.
Okay. So if there isn't, there's one more question here in the queue. If there aren't any other ones, we'll just ask Jaime this final question, and then we'll wrap it up. What happens if part of my cloud infrastructure doesn't have an API?
So, find a new cloud infrastructure provider. That's a little too simple. Obviously, again, I said go with what's best for you. Some cloud providers provide APIs for everything. Some don't. Some are all about the GUI. So you go in and do your management in a GUI, and some have really amazing interfaces. So you know exactly what it's going to cost you down to the penny. You can spin up these blueprints that are exactly everything you would need to support whatever use case you've got. You can build new blueprints, so templates for installing an OS and then a database and then an application layer, and really building all that up from scratch, defining it once, and then clicking a button on a web page and having that spin up. But most people are going to want to automate some of this stuff. You want to be able to expand elastically when you start to reach capacity, or even even if it's not overnight, even if you're not getting bursty traffic, eventually you want this stuff to to grow with your business. So I would say an API is essential at this point. People may disagree with me, but it's I think it's essential to really provide a complete cloud platform. If it isn't, so we have some customers that are cloud providers themselves, are service providers, and so they have to worry about lots of stuff in the back end. They have to worry about the infrastructure. They have to worry about the actual low-level storage, and they're using a number of different technologies back there. And so you might need to support something that doesn't have an API at some point in the stack. And for that, we have things like a CLI or an SSH assertion. So a unit of work that can go out and make a call to via SSH to a CLI and run some commands, get some feedback, and move on from there. So you can actually instantiate a piece of hardware or a piece of storage as part of your automated cloud infrastructure spin up, even if it doesn't have an API. And so that you can package up all of those backends, including some that do have APIs, and expose a nice, simple interface to your customers. So that's where our cloud provider customers are doing. Expose a nice, simple interface, and then on the back end, they deal with all the messy stuff. They deal with the CLIs, they deal with the storage, they deal with multiple APIs for multiple different platforms, potentially on multiple different virtualization layers. So it's all about, when you're talking about publishing cloud APIs, it's all about providing the best, most usable interface for your customers.
Right.
And you deal with the ugly stuff. It's all about providing integration to other SaaS services, or go where the data is, and you deal with the ugly stuff. Mm-hmm. And so our customers use us to deal with that ugly stuff.
Right. Good. Sorry, did I cut you off there?
No, no problem.
No.
Any others?
Nope. Just go once around. Nope. It looks like that's it. Great, Jamie. Those were great answers to great questions. Thanks, everybody who joined. We're going to be back on September 18th, and it looks like we're going to be discussing WebSockets. So feel free to come back. It's not after a holiday Monday, so people should be maybe a little bit more awake. So September 18th, WebSockets for our next Tech Talk. Thanks a lot, Jamie. And I think I'm just going to re-ask the question. Last time, if you were with us, we had a trivia question, and we're going to give away one of the new Layer 7 shirts. Here's one that Jamie designed himself. I'm not sure if you can see it all, but just the question is, what's the most popular API on the web? And the hint, you can probably find the answer on Programmable Web. We had a couple people respond, but nobody actually got the right answer. So we're just gonna keep asking the question. And if you can email us the answer to techtalk@layer7tech.com. You can tweet the answer with #layer7live. For the next couple minutes anyway, you could chat it through the stream, on live stream, or on Facebook. And if you get it right, we'll send you one of these T-shirts. We've got Where's Waddle? Where's Waddle? We've got the Four True Statement shirt that Jaime designed, and we've got a couple other ones as well. So what's the most popular API on the web? Like I said, hint, you can go to Programmable Web and find the answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again, Jaime. I don't know if you have any final thoughts or anything, but I really appreciate you being here all the way from San Diego after Labor Day, Tuesday morning. Great job, and thanks a lot. And thanks everybody who joined us. See you on September 18th.
Bye.